Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting with author Thomas Lane, who wrote The Karma Factor. Wow, this book is wow. That's all I got to say. But before we get into the book, Thomas, tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, about me. It's been an interesting life, I'll tell you that. I was raised by a very heavily schooled academic family. We had Harvard and Yale and PhDs and all that stuff. And then there was me, cut from a different fabric. And I sort of motored along and had problems in school and couldn't find my way until I had a bunch of experiences when I was in my teens, late teens, where all of a sudden I just got that what my job was to do was to be the best and the most authentic Tom Lane I could possibly be. And then everything else had to allow that to happen. So I never had a career path. I was a singer-songwriter for a while, and I still am. I got a publishing deal when I was 15, and I thought, oh boy, this is going to be a piece of cake. It weren't. It weren't at all. But anyway, and then I would, do construction. I sold stuff on street corners. I sold frozen lobster tails on Route 101 in California. I lived out there for a while. And jewelry on the streets of New York. I ran off with a rock and roll band for a while. I wrote an artist manifesto. I mean, it was a normal life. But I managed to somehow squeak through it all. And, I found out that I had great passion for writing and for music and for the arts in general, and wrote a book called The Artist Manifesto a while back. And here I am talking to you about a book I just wrote called The Karma Factor. And here I am.
Yeah. First of all, I want to say in your bio, something really stood out for me, and I want to just touch on it.
Sure.
You heard Dr. King speak?
I did.
Wow. Tell me what that experience was like, because that you don't hear a lot of people that are still alive and breathing talk about that. So share that with us.
Okay. Well, I'm so glad, because in something I wrote, I said there were two, in my zigzaggy life, there were two epicenters, and one of them was the March on Washington. And I was a young kid. I think I was 12. And I don't really remember how I got there. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't hitchhike, but I ended up being there. And all of a sudden, there was like thousands of people that were like in this whole thing about peace and brotherhood. And it just went so deep with me. And then I heard, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Dylan, and these various icons for me. And then Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. And the chilling part of this is that, as I said, I didn't tell my parents I was going. I didn't know that they went. Turns out my mother was there, and I didn't know that. And it was like probably halfway through the event, I saw a figure sitting on the little pond there in front of and facing the Washington Memorial. And I recognized it was my mother.
Wow.
So I went up behind her and I put my hands on her eyes and I said, guess who? And she turned around and said, I knew. And I had a complicated relationship with her, bless her heart. She's just a wonderful, wonderful soul. She's no longer with us. But that was one of those moments that cut through everything. And I feel so fortunate to have been there.
Wow. I can't even imagine how it must have felt. I get goosebumps just reading that. I'm like, that is just like amazing to be able to talk to somebody who was actually there.
Yeah. I have the button still.
Wow.
March on Washington. Yeah. I don't know quite how I got there, but I have ever since then, the whole racial situation has been very important to me. and I've written songs about it and videos, and it's just intolerable what's going on.
Now, you also mentioned Bob Dylan in that thread too, and that seemed to be something that you pointed out in your bio as well, that he made an impact on your life. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So I don't remember how, I was probably 12 years old, an unhappy lad, didn't seem to be fitting in anywhere. And I would turn off the lights. Something about, it was a hard rain was going to fall, that particular song. And just the poetry of it and kind of the understating, of, I saw a ladder all covered in water, I walked 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard. These things so interacted with my particular loneliness and discontent. And I felt somebody is watching, somebody's out there. And one of the great things about art is that it makes you feel less lonely, less separate from the world. My little truth is great entertainment can change your mood. Great art will change your life. And listening to him did change my life.
So when did you decide, okay, I'm going to start writing? Because you said you got the publishing deal when you were 15,
Right.
but you were a singer-songwriter too. So when did you decide, okay, I'm going to write some books?
I was a jock. I was all about football, baseball, basketball. And then I stopped growing. And then I probably hormonal, intrigue back then. And also I have to say that, feeling as an outsider, when my fourth grade teacher, I was 9 years old, read The Hobbit, all of a sudden, again, this one opened up worlds for me about a hero who could be a schnooky little guy and still be, firm and tough and smart and outwit dragons. That was, all of that came together in terms of maybe something when I didn't have the sports thing to obsess about, because I stopped growing and then other kids got better than me. I was out ahead of them. And then I saw that I was never going to have a career. And then it started matriculating into wanting to create, wanting to express. And it went from guitars and singer-songwriter and performing in clubs in New York, to writing novels and poetry. And then later I got into collaging and painting.
So you're basically a jack of all trades, correct?
I guess I am. She is charged.
So what made you decide to write The Karma Factor? Because this book is unlike any other book I've ever read.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would like to know more about that if you'd like to tell me, but I can answer the question. So on these two tracks of being kind of a sports guy, action adventure, sort of a guy of the streets a bit, was this vivid, all-encompassing imagination that I had that went into these different areas of artistry. And then somewhere along the line, I found out about the Akashic records. And somehow the thought of using that, now I've come to see the Akashic records as a very profound, and in the right hands, it's an amazing, amazing device. But I kind of saw it initially as a database of past lives. And I thought, oh my God, what if we use that as a profile instead of the police profile? He was arrested on October 2nd. He had a kid, did all the suspects. What if this became a profile of thousands of years? And what if the seeds of crime, of wanting to be a killer, were actually back 300 years ago? That's where the crime really started with this guy. If you believe in past lifetimes, then you would have to get the guy to really change, instead of coming back as a criminal, getting executed or put in jail, coming back next time, doing it again, broken records, scratch. What if you could actually get in there and find out what was it, the turning point that got him from a spiritual soul, an entity, into somebody that wanted to revenge something that happened? And so, and this would be a whole nother approach to crime and becoming whole as a human being, if you could be accountable for things done in the past. And that was the premise for the karma factor.
See, then you just asked the question, why did I think it was unlike? And it's exactly what you just described. The fact that you were going back in the past lives and finding out that the past lives, what you did in the past life will affect the current life that you're in.
Yeah.
I've never read a book like that. That was the basis. So I was like, wow, this is really like, oh my gosh, just like boing. I will admit at the very beginning, it was kind of slow for me, but once I got into it and started really devoting time to reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot put this book down now.
Well, that's interesting. I have a friend who's light years from karma and spiritual and stuff like that, but he loved noir and detectives and whatever. So he's reading. Everything is okay, you know, bad guy, good guy, whatever. And then all of a sudden I don't know if you remember, there's a part where the bullets, where my detective is trying to take himself out, steps into a hail of machine gun, and the bullets get diverted, and they end up in New Mexico. And my guy, and he's going, how did this happen? Why? I have to find out now why this happened. But my friend, when he hit that, he went, nah, come on. But slowly, as he continued in the book, it kind of all made sense, and it did work for him.
That is so true. We need to take a brief commercial break, but when we come back, you're going to read a part of the karma factor, correct?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So here we go for our commercial.
Hi, my name is Joanna, and I would like to share with you a little bit about Shores of Grace, Shores Philly. It's a ministry located in Philadelphia. The portion of Shores that I volunteer for goes into Kensington, an area greatly impacted by homelessness and addiction. And we go and we take love, food, clothing, snacks, conversation. We believe that it is a way that we can meet people right where they are and show them the love of Jesus. We have seen lives changed in big ways and in small ways, and we have built wonderful relationships with the people in the community. We have big plans, more we'd like to do, and we would appreciate any support, either through prayer or through donation. If you would like to donate, you can go to shoresofgrace.com, and in the menu, click on Donate. And we just ask that you put Philly in your donation comments. Thank you.
And we are back chatting with Thomas Lane, who's the author of The Karma Factor. And Thomas, before we went to the break, I asked, would you read? So it's all yours to read.
Okay. Well, I'm going to read the prologue, actually, which is it's sort of the big picture. And I had this thought, what if? It seems to me, in my humble estimation, that things go back to the core, the problems and the beauty that we manifest has to do with the core, which is called the soul in most people's vernacular. Well, what is it? And what is karma? How does it work? What is this stuff? So in the most top layer of what I had written here, I thought, what if these wise people all from all over got together and made a dedicated research project to find out what it was? Mm-hmm. This is the overarching storyline of the karma factor. In the spring of 1946, a renegade Tibetan monk named Paulden sat at a small desk in front of a fire and penned a letter. It would be copied and sent to 32 recipients in all, dispatched to locations around the world. The envelopes would mysteriously appear on doorsteps and in mailboxes and be read by scientists and mystics and artists, poets and philosophers. The message was simple. Humankind was on a path to self-destruction. In the not too distant future, life would become unsustainable. The cycle must be broken. The monk had chosen his moment. The war was over. Hitler had been defeated. But tomorrow another strong man would rise again, and the cycle of horrors would repeat over and over until the fragile ecosystems of life were destroyed and the miracle of Earth silenced forever. A new approach was called for, and the call was urgent. The letter asked the recipients to join Paulden in a quest for answers, to extricate themselves from their current lives, and travel in secrecy to a designated place in the Tibetan Himalayas. Here, amidst the timeless skies and majestic peaks, there would be no distractions, no peer pressure, no preconceived ideas. The work would remain pure. Halden's plea was impassioned. Western technology and Eastern thought must combine forces. Science and spirit must unite and enter the realm of the human soul. The mysterious phenomena of karma await scientific investigation. Here on the rooftop of the world, the answers could be found. And on April 6, 1946, the letter was smuggled across the Tibetan border into India and posted from there. 3 weeks later, the invitations began to arrive at their destinations. Soon thereafter, a sampling of advanced thinkers from around the world began to quietly disappear.
Wow. I'm glad you chose that part. I'd forgotten about that last line. It's like, wow, it makes you want to read more. So where did you come up with the character of Early? Because he's a very complex character.
Yes. I mean, as a writer, I don't know if other writers feel this way, but in a sense, all the characters that come out of me are aspects of myself. They're pieces that I know. James Early, Detective NYPD James Early, who is the hero, is the one that is going mad, is going crazy because he's beset, under siege by images and pictures and things he doesn't understand and things that are scary. And I certainly have been through phases like that. And his decision is, I can't take it anymore. I'm going to take myself out. And then, as I described, the bullets got waylaid and he lived. And then he had the choice. It was either to investigate, to find out what the heck happened here. Why have I been saved? And then when he gets into it, he does make that choice. But then there's another choice of, he has this experience of being in Tibet as a young monk. And again, it's like he could dismiss all of that and go on. He was a very well-respected cop, but he chose, call it the road less traveled, which I have tried to do in my own life. And I just felt that, I mean, he's more courageous than me. That's the great thing about writing also. But I just felt that we get tangled into fear and therefore don't pursue certain possibilities that might really be helpful. And so I thought he might be a good lead character.
Yeah, he is a great lead character. And then you have all these other characters that are complex as well, like Tracker. I mean, that one right there, I mean, I could honestly, knowing your background now on being a singer-songwriter, I honestly thought that was you in the book because of the fact that Tracker does all these songs. He's on the, on the boardwalk and Early runs across him and everything.
Tracker is my stage name in my rock and roll band. And I have an album out called Hotel Earth, and it's by Tracker. Tracker as the performer and the writer, composer. I love the name, and it's got energy that comes off it for me. So I took him off the stage and put him in the book, and then I take him out to go out and play some.
How hard was it to write this book? Because you have so many complex characters. You have, Early and Tracker has his own little backstory. And then you have, I forget the girl's name.
Desda.
Yeah. And she has her own little backstory, and they all kind of converge together their stories are kind of intertwined with each other.
Yeah.
And then you even have the assassin and then the albino and all their backstories and everything. I'm like, how in the world does he make it so that these backstories end up tying up you end up tying them up in a package in a great bow? Because I would get confused when I would be right if I wrote this book of where everybody was, because you have so many in-depth characters.
Well, thank you. I mean, they are what I had to do in this particular book. You know, as a writer, you get the backstory of all the characters. You have to know them. So if you're going to walk, you have to walk beside them as a creator to get to know them, and then they will take over eventually, and they'll write their part of the story. But with this one, because it had so much to do with interlocking past lifetimes and stuff like that, I had to go back to try to see if I could understand where these people were coming from a few lifetimes ago. So you're right. And I'm like everybody, all the writers I know, you try to write in layers so that people might understand it here, but not understand it there. And that's okay to go. Some people might go all the way in and go, oh, white man. Interesting. And, white privilege. There's a whole lot of spin-off. That guy, he was albino. I wrote it before, what was it? The Da Vinci Code, where they have an albino bad guy. So the initial story, I didn't copy. I'm doing, oh, please don't sue me now. But anyway, so that's perhaps why they were that complicated.
But the way you tied it up, so their stories kind of intertwined with each other in some way, shape, or form. I absolutely love that. It was genius.
Thank you.
So what made you decide to talk about karma and our past lives in this book?
Well, in the premise about, what is a soul? How does it work? And is there this thing called karma? Are there past lifetimes? These are all, things that a lot of people question. Why am I here? I mean, all that stuff. And for me, it was important to understand, at least try to understand from one man's humble viewpoint, how I experience karma, how I experience if I'm not being accountable, just even in a daily life, if I'm sharp with my wife, or if I'm, impolite to somebody on the phone, or, or I exaggerate and I don't feel clean about it. There are these little vibes of no, something not right there. And I want to be clean. I want to be a whole person. So where does that leave karma? Is a karma force from outside? Are there sort of karma police that go around, well, you did that, boom, oh, you're a bad person, oh, you have to pay for that? Or is it internal? And I determined, for me, it was at least collaborative, whatever else is out there. But, I am, the degree I can take responsibility for the things that is improper or bad judgment or whatever, then I have a learning curve. If I don't wish to be accountable, I will not learn. So, and my goal is to keep growing. So I think if that answers your question, that's what karma was, a wide open door to explore.
I also want to ask, how long did it take you to write the book and research the book? Because I'm assuming you did a little bit of research as far as the Buddhist monks go.
Yeah. Well, I started the book decades ago, and I wrote it, and then I had to do rewrites, and I tried to get it published, and possibilities of a movie deal and all this kind of stuff. But I did the final version 22, probably 1922. So numbers of hours put in. I take a long time. I don't knock these things off. So it took a lot of time, thousands of hours. And in terms of research, yeah, I read stuff. I looked into karma, what other people had said about it, where the word comes from, the Sanskrit of the word, which means action or deed, other people's take on it. But mostly I listen to my own heart, my own intuition about these things, and that's where I do a lot of research.
Are you a huge baseball fan? Because you do have a character in the book that is baseball.
I'm a big sports fan. Yes, I am a big baseball fan.
Was there a particular baseball player that you were what's the word I'm looking for? That you kind of focused on when you were writing that character?
That's a good question. You're touching on so many points. I have to acknowledge you that I've done a bunch of these now, and you're right. You come at it from a really interesting place. I'm a Dodger fan, but my hero, or one of my heroes in this book, Billy Burwell, was a Yankee. And Dodgers and Yankees are horse and a hat pin. It just, they do not get along. But I made him a very sympathetic character. And I love baseball. I used to go to Dodger Stadium a lot when I lived out in LA. I'm in Providence now. We got the Red Sox, but it's not the Dodgers.
Well, growing up, my parents were from Massachusetts, so I'm in North Carolina, but we would go to Massachusetts and see the Red Sox play all the time when I was little. So
there you go.
You mentioned the movie version. Is there going to be a movie version of this?
We're working on it. That's what I can tell you.
Because I'm thinking, this reminds me, I don't know what the name of the series was, but David Carradine played in it. It was something with Kung Fu.
It was called Kung Fu.
Oh, okay. There you go. But, I'm thinking along the lines of something like that as your book. That's popping into my head.
You are so intuitive. This is amazing. I have thought a lot about that show. That was way back in the 60s, wasn't it?
60s, 70s, 80s. Yeah. I think I'm thinking dating myself now.
Well, I think they had renewed versions of it. I have a treatment of a show which stars my character Tracker in this place called Hotel Earth. And he has that same kind of sort of aloofness, craziness, but every now and then spouts wisdom that is helpful, which is the takeaway from that show. Because he could also fight good, right? But he was a pacifist. So, yeah, that's a great show. Thank you.
Do you have anybody in mind, if it does go to movie, who would you want to play early?
I don't because, I don't know, it just hasn't worked that way. And I'm not that familiar with Hollywood and who's happening and all that. I don't really have that. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Because normally somebody has like their perfect person, even though the person may be old, aged out of the thing, but they were like, man, if he was younger, I would have him play it 100%.
Well, interestingly enough, I had a novella before I had the Karma Factor. I had a novella called The Karma Files, and at least my wife used to think, and it was comedic. It was, he was like Columbo. He was a bit befuddled and whatever, but he was sharp as a razor when it came to spiritual. And I think Brian Dennehy, is that his name?
Dennehy, yeah.
That was my wife's favorite, and I thought, oh, you might be right.
Now, going back to the book, you mentioned something called soul prints, which I thought was so amazing. So let's talk about what soul prints are and why you decided to include it in your book.
Okay, so I tried to keep the book grounded, not foo-foo, not wild, whatever, but that everything was plausible because it was relatable to something that was concrete and real, like the Akashic Records, a database that is like a profile, a police profile, except it's instead of one lifetime, it's 300. And the other one was police operate by fingerprints. And I thought, well, fingerprints, of course, perish when the body dies. Mm-hmm. But what if the soul had a print that was unique? And there was only one soul print, like a DNA, that was unique in all of eternity to that one specific soul. And in this way, you could track that soul through the soul print, and be able to find and locate and figure out what that soul had done in the past. Because even if he died, you could say, oh, well, that's the same soul print as it was back in the 1400s. So, yeah, it was a really cool device.
And I love the fact that you also put in that if someone touched something that they had to like get rid of it within like 24 hours or so, or they would be infected with their. So it was like an urgency, because a lot of people, when they get something from somebody, or somebody hands them something, you need to do this now. They put it on their desk and they just let it sit there and let it sit there. And I like the fact you had that urgency of like, okay, we need to check this out now.
Yeah. It was that was another device just to give it a time urgency. You're exactly right about these soul prints, that they could be the only people who are trained in my book could actually see them, like Detective Early, because he had a history of being raised previously in a Tibetan monastery. And so he could see it. So he could see this. And the bad ones, the ones that were really current active evil, had this reddish tinge to them. So he could see the red, and he could then put his heart line, this is the device I used, on top of it, and it would adhere to it. But then he had to get it stripped, which is that the sort of the link that puts him into the library of souls in 24 hours, or he would start turning into that evil. That evil would start matriculating into his own system, and he would become somebody really not very, very cool.
I mean, I just love that concept. And you also said this was a story about hope. What do you say is the story about hope?
Because at least my attempt was that there is another way of perceiving things. And in my book, it was through the karma keepers, those that were monitoring and running the Akashic records. They were the safekeepers of that. And there was a hierarchy of wisdom of people who had sort of graduated from the earth plane, who are up there trying to help out. And, it's some people believe that there are there. And I've had some experiences, let's say that. But the thought that there's an alternative to the way we're doing with things. It just sometimes feels to me it's like scratchy record keeps skipping and going back into the same groove over and over. We have the same hardships, the same problems with getting along with other tribes, and the same, low self-esteem, all that stuff. There's no learning curve. It doesn't seem to get a lot better. You can read something about how horrible modern times are, and then people treat each other mean and they're greedy. And it was written in 1700s. So the thought was that here's another solution, even if it's just pure fantasy. I'm just a fiction writer, but there might be other ways of approaching stuff, and I'm all about looking at possibles, being open to the possibilities of life, and that if you're willing to, instead of saying, if we live in mansions of 450 room mansions but stay in one room, we'll never know. We'll never know about the other possibilities. So I think that's what I was trying to say there.
Yeah. Going back to your bio, it said you kind of became a kind of recluse, and then you came out with this, and it's like, whoa, you totally have to get out of your comfort zone. How did you push yourself to get out of your comfort zone?
The same way Early pushed himself to find out more. I just felt like, as kind of off the grid, but not that I lived in the woods and had a beard down to here and birds flying out of my hair, but I just sort of as a creator and as a person, I just didn't want to have much to do. And I would, I have an organization that works with homeless people, and we do philanthropic work and that stuff. So I'm engaged, but in my heart of hearts, I couldn't see playing the game of getting out there and promoting, and in a rock and roll thing, you get out there with 3 other guys and you just hammer, you sleep, live, eat, breathe, rock and roll. That's what you do. I was never built that way. I liked my time alone. I liked my solitude, but it just felt like there was so much going on. There's so much, call for hope, for light, for justice, for all those things. And that I was very privileged to be in the situation I'm in. And the least I could do was get out of my comfort zone and get out there and talk to people and get the book out there and try to get my music out there and just do what I can from my world, from my hat, and it's an all hands on deck time. No matter what your deck is, it's time to take the next step.
You just mentioned your foundation, so let's talk about your foundation.
Okay, interesting story. It has to do with my mom, who I ran into at March on Washington. She was a writer. My dad taught at Yale. She was a writer, but she was a relentless activist. And anything that came along, marching for peace, she went down to Selma, recorded for the blind, wrote letters to prisoners, and worked in soup kitchens. And she also wrote a couple of books that were very small, but well received. And so when she worked in soup kitchens in New Haven, she got curious about the guests, the people that got fed. And she said she wanted, would they let her tell their stories? And most of them would. So she compiled about maybe 18 different stories. And she had a manuscript called Dinner at 6, Voices from the Soup Kitchen. And I read it and I was floored. She did a great job. She just let them have their moment and say that what she didn't try to, overhype it or understate it. She just let it be. And her publisher didn't want to publish it. So, and I had read it and I felt, this is powerful stuff. So I convinced my family to print our own copies and instead of a commercial venture as a philanthropic one, give the books to soup kitchens so they could sell the books and keep the money. My mom didn't want a dime. So we actually did this. My wife took the picture that was the cover. We edited it and fixed it up and whatever, and then printed it. And then started, every time I'd hear about a soup kitchen, I'd call them up, but see if they wanted books, no strings attached, do what you will. We'll pay the shipping. We'll do everything. Just go out and sell it and promote real stories about homeless people. And it caught on. We had like 100 different organizations carrying it. And we raised tens of thousands of dollars. And when she departed, I guess it's about 10 years now, there was money from my grandparents who were quite wealthy. And I convinced them and my father to let me start an organization called the Helen Hudson Foundation. That's my mother's pen name. She's Helen Lane, but she wrote under Helen Hudson. So we brought the foundation up here. We incorporated in Rhode Island, and we've continued the work.
Wow. Honestly, that's a great story as it is.
Isn't that a beautiful story? Yeah. I felt so blessed. I was the one that benefited most from all this because I could do a little bit here and there, and I was just the messenger. It had nothing to do with me except distributing.
So what does your organization do besides help with the homeless in the soup kitchens?
Well, now, because just like I was saying before, there's so many sort of mouths to feed, hearts to quell. I just, when I hear about a situation, whether it's, helping, damaged animals or hunger, or Ukraine, homelessness, I fund some stuff there. I just help, supply some money here and there. We don't have deep pockets, but UNICEF, there's a million causes. I can't do political stuff from there, which is too bad. But we do our little bit.
Wow. Why is it that you can't do political stuff? I'm being nosy.
Because the money has to go to nonprofit 501(c)s basically. And we make some donations from our own personal money, but I'm not allowed to do that through the 501(c)(3) thing.
So what makes you, do you think it's your mom and dad, your parents, exposing you to all this turmoil, I want to say, because you march on Washington, you said your mom marched in Selma and did all this other stuff. Do you think them, as you were growing up, them exposing you to all that and showing you how to fight, is why you're so passionate about that, and why you were so passionate about including that in your book as well?
Yeah, I think very much so. The inspiration I got from these folks that were working hard to help and coming out of service, uh, these were heroic people for me. And it wasn't Hollywood celebrities or necessarily rich and famous people. It's people that did the work because they were honest and integrated human beings, and they wanted to help. So it was very much that. And I found in my own artistry and that I was most excited or passionate when art and spirit and social justice intersected. And those three things came together. And I have I have books about, stories about the ecological situation and about the plight of artists, the artist manifesto I wrote. I'm called to write about those things, and I have to, there are a lot of influences, but I think very much so with particularly my mother.
What's in the works now that you got Karma Factor out? It came out late last year, correct?
Right.
What's in the works now?
I'm working on something called The Sponsor. It's a screenplay. I did have Hollywood interest a while back. That person is sort of no longer operating, but I dug it out and I'm close to finishing. It's about how greed and capitalism makes it very difficult for some folks to survive in this culture, and the incredible pressures it puts on people. So there's that, and then I'm redoing the Artist Manifesto. I'm upping it, and I have about 20,000 other things I'd like to do. I got another book of poetry, got another album that I'd like to do. I'll be occupied for the rest of this life.
So I was like, yeah, it doesn't sound like there's ever a dull moment. What do you do in your downtime? Because it doesn't, because most people, when they're on their downtime from their real job job, they do all the stuff that you're doing as your job right now.
That's right. I'm so very, very fortunate in that my creative process is not a hardship. I know a lot of artists that really struggle over that line or that chord or whatever. And I don't. It's just, knock wood. I don't know where it comes from. Just as long as it keeps coming, I'm happy. I will do it. And I do take time off. My wife and I watch a lot of shows on TV and news. I follow the news pretty avidly. We got an interesting day today in Miami.
Oh, yeah.
I'll say no more. But anyway, yeah. But it's fun for me. It's not arduous. Oh, well, it's not always easy, but I'm just a very fortunate guy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And this book, like I said, is wow. Now, our time is almost up. Before we talk about where people can find the book and where they can find you, is there one last little nugget that you want to leave us with?
Thanks for having me. I mean that. I really mean that. It's just such for me and for a lot of people I know, it's such a time to be, how do I deal with this, some have called it tipping point moment, this inflection point. We got global warming. We got a lot of stuff. And I don't have any words of wisdom, but I do feel, at least with me and myself, how I responded, what I felt was needed was for me to take the next step towards what I already felt I should be doing, which I had sort of not yet, like getting out there and publishing a book and doing that. Not yet. Yeah, I'm almost there, but the heck with the not there yet. This was for me anyway, however it strikes anyone, but just exploring the possibilities that lie maybe beyond one's normal routines. I think that's very healthy.
That is so true. Now, where can people find you?
Well, I have a website, which there it is, thomaslane.com. We're fixing it up. In a couple of days, it's going to have poetry and music and Karma Factor and all those things. You can get the Karma Factor on Amazon right now. And I think it's at Barnes and Noble. The music is, if you want to hear that, it's under Tracker, Trakker, and the album is called Hotel Earth. It's at Spotify and all those places. And you can find me in your hearts somewhere. I'll find you in mine. I'll make you a deal.
I love that. I do have to ask one more question. The shape of this book is a little bit different. It's a little bit bigger than your regular book, and I love the fact that you had the bigger print. Was that on purpose?
Yeah, it was. I went back and forth on it because it seems maybe a little cumbersome. At the same time, that cover, you have no idea how long that took to get together, how many takes, got right up to the line of print. I went, no. And people have said that it's like a little bit more of an event because it's bigger and the print's bigger, and I struggle with small print, not just because I'm older, but just because it's very, very small. Anyway, those thoughts.
I love that. You made it convenient for you and convenient for others as well.
There you go.
Thomas, thank you for coming on, guys. The book is called The Karma Factor, and y'all read this book. I mean, once I started reading it, like I said, once I got into it, I couldn't stop. I literally had to finish it up. So I think I read it in like 2 days. It was like I was done with it. So I will put in the show notes everywhere where you can find The Karma Factor, where you can find Thomas. And Thomas, thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your talent with the world, for sharing about your experience with Martin Luther King Jr., because I think that is an amazing experience that a lot of people don't get a chance to do. And
Absolutely.
And for taking the time to just sit and talk and chat.
Well, thanks for having me. It's really, really been a pleasure.
All right, guys.
All right.
We're going to see you on the next chat from the Blog Cabin. Be blessed. And most importantly, keep chatting. Bye.
Bye.